So rational expressions is just a fancy name for what happens when we have fractions that has variables all over the place in the top and the bottoms of the fraction. Before we get to that more advanced algebra, I want to quickly go over just a good old basic example of adding fractions together. So we'll do 1/2 plus 3/5. As we know, you are not allowed to add or subtract fractions unless they have a common denominator. So we're going to start with this nice middle school level, then we'll bring it up to the Algebra 2 college level, okay? So in order to make this happen, you can always take one denominator from this fraction and turn it into your multiplier here. Then you can grab the other denominator and multiply it over there. And this is a guaranteed strategy to always get a common denominator. Take this one, turn it into your multiplier. Take that denominator, turn it into your multiplier. 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10. Now that they have the same denominators, when we add or subtract, it stays the same, and you add or subtract the numerators. So that would be 11/10. So at the end of the day, all we're doing is still adding fractions. Obviously, if it's a rational expression, we're gonna have way more variables to handle here. Now the strategy we used in just 1/2 plus 3/5, we can also use here, because you cannot add or subtract any fraction, no matter how complicated, unless they have the same denominator downstairs. So I can take this denominator and turn it into my multiplier over here. And I can take this denominator and make it into my multiplier for my other fraction. Sorry, I'm running out of space a little bit over here. Now up here, when you have more than one item up in the numerator, it is gonna be like distribution. So 3 times x will give us 3x. 3 times 3y is negative 9y. 3 times 5y squared is 15y squared. Now for the other one, 5x times 5y squared will be 25xy squared. 3 times 5y squared will give us 15y squared. So once again, we just took the denominators, and that's what we made into our multiplier. And now, since they have the same denominator, we are allowed to combine these as any like terms that we see. Now, if I look at the numerator, there is no other regular x. There is no other regular y. There is no other xy. Because remember, like terms must have the same variables and exponents attached at the end. So we would be done right there. So now let's try one with subtraction. Once again, you are not allowed to add or subtract any fraction unless they have a common denominator. So I'm going to take this denominator and turn it into my multiplier for my other fraction. Then I'll take this one and turn it into my multiplier for this one. So we're just going to grab those denominators and turn them into the multiplier. So once again, you can sort of think of this as distribution. 5n times 5n is 25n squared. 5n times negative 5 is negative 25n. Over, I'm just going to leave these as factors. You could do the double distribution, but I'm just going to leave them as the factors multiplied together. So I distributed that 5n, then I just put my two denominators side by side. Minus, once again, this is going to be like distribution. 6 times n is 6n. 6 times 3 is 18. Over, I'm going to leave my two denominators as factors. Oops. It's an n plus 3. Okay. Now, subtraction does get a little more complicated because we do need to combine our like terms right now, but this subtraction technically also needs to be distributed before we continue, and that will be your most common mistake. The adding example before will be a little bit easier for you. You have to remember when we're subtracting, that subtraction must be distributed to every item, every term, and the following fraction. So let's go ahead and show that work. So we're going to end up with negative 6n up there and negative 18. Negative times 6n, negative times 18, which is still over the 5n minus 5 and the n plus 3. Now they have common denominators. We just distributed our negative, so now we can combine our like terms. There's no other n squared out there. Negative 25 minus 6n will get us negative 31n. There's only one constant out there. And when we add or subtract fractions, we do not change the denominator.